Welcome to the podcast where we take something old, a Doctor Who story from the original series, compare it with something new, one from the new series, and add something borrowed. Well, there's no sketch this time, but there might be the odd second-hand opinion along the way. And that makes Something Who. Hello, I'm Richard, and we're back with Something Who podcast, episode 86, where this time we're looking at two stories that involve regeneration at Christmas time. Okay, the first one's a bit of a cheat. Third Doctor story, Planet of the Spiders, the finale from season 11, was repeated during the Christmas holidays in 1974. But after that, we'll examine the 11th Doctor's swansong, The Time of the Doctor, which was the Christmas special in the anniversary year of 2013. And with me this time to decide whether these stories are refreshing palate cleansers or makeovers from hell are two Something Who regulars. So first, it's our resident storyteller, Paul. Hello, Paul.
Good evening. Good evening at the time of recording. Good whatever hour of the day it should be, listener.
Yeah. I don't suppose we can prescribe when people should listen to us. It'll always be evening for me, I guess. And also science and astronomy writer, Giles.
Evening. Yes. It is the evening, definitely. It's always the evening. It's always the evening somewhere. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'm aiming to actually do a better job of editing this than normal so that we actually get this out in time for Christmas. Since it is sort of loosely Christmas themed.
Oh, in that sense.
Yes. Speed rather than quality. I was thinking, don't hard on yourself, Richard. It's not that bad. It's not the tightest podcast I've ever heard, but it's...
Yeah, the quality may drop a little bit in order to get the speed up, but we'll see how we go. I mean, I'll do my absolute best in the available time.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether we want to say anything about it. Since we last spoke, we've had the 3 Tennant specials. I mean, I as an opening gambit, I could say that I personally found that I liked them increasingly. I guess I found the Star Beast okay. The Giggle I thought was excellent, and Wildly Yonder was sort of somewhere in between. I don't know if you wanted to venture any thoughts of your own.
Oh, crikey. I had a whale of a time with all 3 of them. It's so nice to have... I thought it was perfectly judged. It was just so clever, wasn't it? 3 different slices of Who, nice and reminiscent of days gone past, if one era in particular. I think the middle one was the oddest. I mean, lots of people commented. Some people appeared to have missed the point and said, "Well, these are supposed to be anniversary specials. There's nothing very special about this middle one. There's only got 2 people in it." But I would have thought, why the reason it's there? Well, cynics might say it's to save money. Why do you need to save money when you're coming back for a 60th anniversary? If you've only got David Tennant and Catherine Tate back for 3 episodes, you need to make the most of them. And if they're going to be surrounded by spectacle, and they have to share the screen with a few other returning characters either side, perhaps not as much as some people would have wanted, but really this is giving us something we never quite got. It's giving us Midnight, but with Donna in it. So that was my favourite of the 3. But they were all sensational. You all know what I think about the Celestial Toymaker. He doesn't... No apologies required for the Toymaker from me. And but he was terrific. So that's all right then.
Excellent. Yes, very good.
Yes. Yeah. No, I also thoroughly enjoyed.
Good.
Yeah, they all had their ups and their downs, but generally it just felt like everything was operating on a, much, on another level from some of the stuff we've had to put up with. It was just quite nice to be able to turn on and sort of not have to feel like, okay, is this going to be a good one or a bad one? Just feel that reasonably confident that you were going to have a fun ride, whatever they threw at you. Really, yes, yeah. I've got my little quibbles about some bits of them, but nothing too bad. And it's just it's very nice to have it up and running again. And I guess the remit really was to. Well, it felt a bit like the remit was to say, okay, here's all the stuff that Doctor Who can do, and just to be a big reminder of that. We can do funny, we can do scary, we can do weird, we can do a combination of all 3 and quite epic at the same time, and just be So I think it's been a great yeah, palate cleanser is a good word really for the whole new era, and I'm looking forward to. Good Lord, it's only going to be next Monday, isn't it? Christmas Day. And,
I mean, palate cleanser is one word for it, isn't it? I didn't even get round to mentioning how, in terms of all the things that were clever about it, how it ties up the first, what have we had, 18 years, however many, 14 series of Doctor New Who in a bow, so that we can start afresh. Now, if you'd told the average Doctor Who fan ahead of time, that there was going to be a soft reboot with Shuji Gatwa, possibly, partly for the benefit of all those wonderful new Disney Plus viewers who are going to be brought in, we could be expanding the viewership dramatically, in which case you do need to not scare them away. But of all the ways you could approach that, this was so economical. To pick up that thread that the Doctor, since the show was brought back, they've never got over the idea that the Doctor is a character suffering some sort of lingering trauma in the new series. Every successive showrunner has added to it. Every time somebody's tried to shut down the one source of trauma, somebody's invented another one. And Russell appears to have spotted this and thought, which was interesting, because going into Star Beast, it seemed very familiar because, it was the next episode, wasn't it? The Doctor's reaction to the Timeless Child stuff and the destruction of Gallifrey almost reset his mental state to where the Ninth Doctor was back in 2005. So you might have thought, Russell would think, oh, this is very familiar, I'll carry on writing it exactly the same way. But he obviously recognised that he could have some fun with that and also draw a line under it without it feeling rushed. I was just very impressed. And although one is suspicious that the reason the 14th Doctor is hanging around off stage left is in case we need a spare the break glass for emergency tenant in case figures fall. The in-universe story that the Doctor needs time to get over his problems so the 15th Doctor could be bright and sparkling and unencumbered. And we haven't got time to show that in 3 episodes, so this is perfect. The science is a bit hand-wavy, and I mean, there's a lot you have to infer, but I think the dialogue is there so that we can infer that somehow, however many years the 14th Doctor lives just sipping Pims in a garden is what enables the 15th Doctor to bounce around in his undies without a care in the world. So, just genius.
Yeah. And I guess this story kind of the other way around, I suppose. The Planet of the Spiders actually, shows 2 versions of a Time Lord existing at the same time in Campo and Choji.
Point. Yeah.
Quite. If I'd remembered, I might have mentioned that. We do. People have. Although a bi generation is obviously something new, regardless of the rather extraordinary expanded version that Russell has posited that it's rebounded back up the Doctor Time stream and happened to all of them, regardless of whether we take that as read or not. There have been plenty. I mean, it didn't bother me for a second, because I'm getting old. I'm not as uptight a fan as I used to be, but also we've seen so many different types of regeneration. You can't really complain about Tennant's costume changing. I might still grumble about the reasons for it, but you can't complain about it on screen because we saw that with the first one. But we've seen variations on dual regenerations with Campo and Choji, which also seems to be reflected again with the Watcher going into Davo. So there are plenty of spins on it, and which act as kind of a precedent, but also the opening the door to say, clearly this is not such a simple singular process as we might have assumed.
Yeah, but it's arguable. It's arguable that the first kind of regular regeneration is perhaps Davison into Baker, which is, it's bizarre when he says feels different this time, because they've all been different, haven't they? Every single one of them to that point has been different, and it's really only at that point that maybe some kind of standardization starts to break in, although then actually the remaining ones in the classic era are all over the shop as well. Every time it's different, isn't it?
He's always needed a push, hasn't he? The TARDIS helps him the first time.
Yeah.
The Time Lords are inspired of the entire thing the second time, but here Choji implies that it needs a push.
Yeah.
I mean, that's very vague. It could be anything. It could just be that the Doctor's been too damaged to regenerate on his own.
Yeah.
We don't know. The rules are all over the bloody place, and they will continue. One thing we didn't get this year was any post-regeneration. What's the word? Eccentricity.
Mania, maybe.
Anything. I mean, yeah, we didn't get. There was no lying in bed for 24 hours or being hyper. Even though we've apparently skimmed over.
Oh, with Tennant's, yes.
Yeah, with Tennant.
Yeah, I was thinking more with the
I mean, even if you incorporate the Dalek cutaway. Did I say? I keep pointing this out because I'm rather delighted by the fact that both times the Doctor's regenerated into David Tennant, our first sighting of him has been in a Children in Need special, which has dealt with a lot of important plot stuff before we get his first episode proper.
Yeah, I've a hunch. I don't know. I think it seems a little bit odd. I've a hunch that we're going to be seeing. You know, I think Tennant's there for more than emergency. I have a feeling there's a plan that we're going to be seeing him again before.
Well, I mean, they say there are
long.
They say there are no plans. Or that is the most suspicious red flag phrase in the world. No plans.
Yes.
There's nothing written on a bit of paper with plans.
Yes.
Plans of the return of the 14th Doctor at the top. But there could be all sorts of other things that don't come under that heading.
Well, because the thing is, I feel like...
But they couldn't say, because it would be undermining the new Doctor. So we all know. We all know, don't we? We all know. I'm happy with that.
But I think the thing is, they also, they... Just the sheer gusto of it, because I had I'd heard some rumours about that they were going to do something like this, and I thought, no, they never would, because it would undermine Shooty and it's bad optics and so on. But I felt like what they did, somehow the way it played out, you were never in any doubt from the moment that Shooty turned up that okay, this is where our focus of attention is, and this is the new guy and the new shiny and everything, and slightly to the detriment of the old toy maker, unfortunately. But
well, yes, this is true.
I felt like it was a bit of a shame that they didn't have, that he sort of then got sidetracked.
It's as much a shame that they sort of had him beaten definitively, which seems to close the door on him turning up anytime soon. It's just as much as a shame that they made such a point of the fact that they hadn't met again since the first one.
Yes,
because they have, and they've had a lot of fun.
Yes,
in audio form.
Yeah.
Oh well.
Audio fun.
Yeah. I mean, I found that I could have. I mean, there were a few things I could have quibbled about in that last one, the Toy Maker one. But frankly, I was enjoying it so much that I couldn't care about it. But really, I was along for the ride. I was enjoying the ride, and I thought it was really well told. So. It's a bit like that discussion we had with Gav about Pyramids of Mars. I mean, there's some bonkers things that happen in Pyramids of Mars, but it's Pyramids of Mars, so you kind of accept that there's craziness in there because it's a great story, well told. Should we move on to Planet of Spiders? What we're supposed to be actually talking about?
We ought to, yes, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so
I think it was important we had that little chat there, because I doubt any of the other hundreds of Doctor Who podcasts have mentioned those three specials. So there's probably
yes, absolutely.
There's been a John Dearth of coverage.
Oh, very good.
Yeah,
sorry, that made it sound. The way I sold that was as though I'd been planning it for months.
Yes,
yeah, frankly,
absolutely.
Oh, the lightness of touch for which I'm famous. Carry on.
Yes.
Okay, so Planet of the Spiders, written by Robert Sloman and an uncredited Barry Letts, directed by Barry Letts, produced by Barry Letts. In fact, it's Barry Letts.
Yes.
For this review, I watched the omnibus edition, which was shown apparently between 2:45 and 4:30 p.m. on the 27th of February 1974. I couldn't have told you that.
December.
December. I did know that it was a Friday and it was the day before Robot. And I definitely watched it. Yeah. I definitely watched it on that broadcast. So, in fact, it was the first Doctor Who story I saw twice. and therefore clearly it's not one that I haven't seen since broadcast.
Ring out the bells.
Yeah,
We
absolutely.
found one.
And certainly at the age of 7, I thought the giant spiders were a great monster. And I also would have read the Target book, which came out in late '75. I remember from that the fact that they've got the changing face on the cover.
Oh yes.
And the illustration looks nothing like Pertwee, although I have now seen the reference photo for that, and that doesn't look anything like Pertwee either. So I don't know what happened. He was just pulling a strange face at the time it was taken, I suppose.
Well, that's Pertwee for you.
Yeah.
Probably doing a funny voice as well.
So yeah, and the omnibus is quite nice actually, because it removes about 45 minutes of the length without. I mean, I don't know. There are some bits that I noticed were missing, but I felt nothing was egregious. Anyway, I'll allow you to give me your reminiscences about having seen it or what you remember of it before you actually watched it this time.
Who's going first?
Okay, I'm leaving in here. For reference, I didn't realise that the omnibus had actually come out on the DVD special edition, I believe, hasn't it? So yes. So I didn't. So I sat through all 6 episodes.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can tell us about the points of difference then. Anyway,
Gareth Honey Goodness. Well, no, I can't because I haven't seen them,
yeah.
and I wasn't going to put myself through the omnibus after watching the 6 episodes. Yes, so I probably first saw this probably when it came out on VHS, whenever that was. But I was very, very familiar with the book. I would have had the second cover. Was it Jeff Cummins?
Right.
But the one with the blue crystal and the spider.
Yes, I remember that too.
Which
Yeah.
being somewhat arachnophobic freaked me out, and obviously the iconography of it, so with the spider on her back and all of that malarkey. From the Doctor Who monster book, I guess that must have come up in things like that. So I was very familiar with it all before I ever got around to seeing it. And I always feel slightly robbed of a Joe Grant cameo at the start. And there's bits of it. Yeah, well, there's definitely bits of it that you feel like, oh, that's weird. I mean, there's some very strange edits or stuff that didn't get filmed at various points anyway. So yeah, so there's bits that obviously are in the book. Not that I've read the book for years, so I feel like I know that version. Then there's bits that are missing. Even when you see the 6 episodes, you think, yeah, but hang on, what about that bit? So
Interesting.
yes,
Interesting you should say that.
so I've probably seen it a couple of times.
I guess I read the book first. I had the newer cover. Only read it once. There's lots of books to read. The thing I remember most about the book is feeling very sorry for Professor Clegg.
Yeah.
He really, Terence is good at those sorts of moments. Pathos out of those smaller characters. It was not something he's famous for compared to some writers, but he was effective when he did it. So yes, that's always stuck with me. I always kind of blamed the Doctor for that. I don't know if it makes it seem more like the Doctor's fault in the book than it is on television, because every time I expect to be really annoyed with the Doctor for it.
He's quite careless, isn't he? I guess you could say at the least.
And then I believe I had a bootleg of a copy of the story in the late 80s from Australian TV, part of a batch that I acquired. But I never watched it very often. Even less often than the Time Monster, which was also... It was one of those... I don't know why. I think... I could have sworn I'd only seen it once before today. But on the other hand, the first half of the story, all the stuff on Earth, seems very familiar. And then once we get to Metabilis, I barely remember any of it. But maybe I just blanked it out of my mind, because that's the point where I always expect the story to go off a cliff. I expect that to really drag everything else down and ruin it. And today I watched the edited repeat, as Richard told us to. Went on an extraordinarily long trip. I went on a very long... No, I was very pleased that you had, because that saved me 50 minutes. I went on a very long treasure hunt around the house trying to find the DVDs. Ever since you mentioned it a few weeks back, I thought, oh yes, I'll just get the Blu-ray out off the shelf for that. And of course, the Blu-ray was not there because it doesn't exist. So I had to go into my black archive, into my deep vault storage. It's actually in the attic.
Yeah.
It just took all afternoon to find it. But I was delighted with the cut down version. I've certainly never enjoyed Planet of the Spiders as much as I did on this viewing, and I think it was the editing that helps a lot. I'm sure there are a lot of Pertwees that I would put on far more often if they were in this format. I thought the editing was... do you want to talk about the editing later?
No, let's go with it, since we're talking about it.
Yeah. So what were you going to say?
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, my reckoning was there's a lot less Planet of the CSO in this edited version.
You reckon? What? So where... But I don't even know. Because I'm not that familiar with it, and there were no episode breaks in the version I watched most recently, viz. Today, I don't know which episode we get to Metabilis in. Is it 4 or 5? It's earlier than... It's not like Time Monster, where we only get to Atlantis with about an episode and a half to go. It's in
4.
During episode 4?
Is it 4? Oh, good lord!
Because three's the big old chase, isn't it?
We got there
No,
earlier than I
two's the
expected.
big old chase.
Two's
Two's the big
okay.
old chase. I think it's the end of episode 3. Is
Okay.
when, roughly.
Okay.
Sorry,
It's like-
no,
I think
I should bloody well know this, shouldn't I? I mean,
I think it was just after an hour through, out of 1 hour 45 in this version.
Yes.
This is me being picky here. I was really enjoying the story. It felt very... I like the groundedness of it for the first hour of this. I'm going to keep talking about it as if the omnibus is the only one that exists.
Yeah.
And I was dreading getting to Metabilis. And it didn't disappoint. It looks pretty awful when it first appears. But I thought it would have been better. And in fact, if we have time, I'm going to discuss 6-part stories. And you know that famous idea, Bob Holmes decided that they were a terrible format, and the only way to make them work was to make them a 4 and a 2.
Yeah.
Or is that a 2 and a 4? I mean, this is the 4 and 2 format, and I'm less keen on that. I think the reason Seeds of Doom works so well is because it's 2 and 4. So we it's not too much of a jolt when the story changes pace, takes that left turn a third of the way in. When it's getting, half or 2/3 of the way in, and you get a big change. I think some writers think that freshens the story. It gives it
Before you dig too much of a hole, it's actually halfway into episode 3.
It can't be.
Yeah, amazingly.
Wow.
I wonder if there's something about... I wonder if they've changed the proportions in the edited version, because it's definitely... I'm sure it's over halfway through. It's all going on very nicely, and it doesn't feel like it needs an injection of something brand new. Anyway, I thought, with my script editor's hat on, I'm not sure if it's a proper script editor's hat, I got it down the market, so... But I thought it would have probably fixed it for me if we'd started, not that you could have done in those days, but if we'd started with a little flashback to Betabilis in the past, with the colony ship arriving and an ominous shot of the spider that causes all the trouble. Because then when we get to Metabilis, we've seen it, and then so we don't think, where's this come from? We're expecting another planet to turn up, And then when we get the even later, when we get the description of how the spiders came to be, there would have been some seeding and foreshadowing of that.
Yes.
So that would fix it for me. But that is quite picky. My main issue is whether it's a good idea to switch. But then I was pleasantly surprised that we didn't completely leave Earth behind, that we kept cutting back. That and the fact that Mike Yates had a role to play for the entire story. I'd completely forgotten that. I thought he just disappeared for some reason.
Yeah, I mean, Metabilis 3 sort of feels... particularly the settlement, it feels like Butlins or something like that. It's sort of... It's very insubstantial. It's sort of full of these little chalets. And then you've got the TARDIS about 3 inches away from one of the chalets, but somehow it's unbelievable peril to walk those that tiny distance over to the TARDIS and back. So I think there's a problem with the way it's realised. Perhaps a bit like Underworld afterwards. It feels like whatever vision Barry Letts had about how this was going to look, it sort of somehow fell a bit short of it.
I am going to say, in his defence, there was one thing I liked, because he was always very ambitious with his use of CSO, and he goes out the way he came in on Doctor Who. It's not his last directed story, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
he goes out being very ambitious, but he does create 3 distinctly different fields on Metebelis, 3 different times a day. There's the night scenes, which look quite good. And there's even a lovely shot, because he's got that vast CSO background to create the entire horizon and sky. He's able to do some interesting things with it, which I think less ambitious directors wouldn't have bothered with. And the brief shot we get of dawn on Metebelis is lovely. I mean, he's just comped in a real dawn, but it looks terrific. It's a shame that most of the shots are daytime, when it just looks like, we've got the Play School studio lighting and everything. But I will give him that. He had a good go at it. It's a shame it wasn't, I'd have made it always night on Metebelis, so we could have had some atmosphere, but, can't have everything. Oh, and, I do hate to talk about technical issues, but the choice of yellow backgrounds for CSO in this is a big mistake, because they clash wildly. If they'd gone with blue, half the time people are against the sky. The Whomobile is flying up in the sky. The Doctor often stood against the bright blue sky on Metebelis. The bloody cave with the blue crystals at the end. It would look terrific if they'd used blue. I wouldn't have cared if he had blue fringing in his hair. It would have made it. I'd have thought, wow, what a great cinematographer you've employed. Look at that. Look at the light reflecting off the blue crystals in the Doctor's hair, I would have said. So that's a shame.
Yeah.
Could that have worked in practical terms, though?
We'd have to change the colour of his bow tie, but apart from that...
Yeah.
Hey, look, mate, make it work.
Yeah, fair
That's all. It's just... You could change the colour of the... TARDIS in each story, so if that's what you're going on, you can't have blue because there's a TARDIS. Just make sure it's not in the... never mind.
Yeah. In terms of that edit, I mean, I think... and it's only a feeling. I think that Metebelis 3 has a pretty heavy toll in terms of chops, but it's not just there. We miss out the cabaret act of Professor Clegg at the very start.
Oh, we missed that out in the broadcast version, the main version as well,
Do we?
which is very, very odd. You have the Doctor and the Brigadier sitting in the audience at the start,
Right.
making with the Brigadier making ribald jokes about the exotic dancer lady. You get some stand-up.
Oh, right.
You get the stand-up comedian first, or the fag end of his act. Then you get the exotic dancer comes on, and it cuts away, and it gives the Brigadier there's an opportunity for a couple of gags about that she's clearly made an impression on the Brigadier. And then just before, and with the Doctor saying, "Well, that's not why I brought you here, Brigadier. We came to see the main event." And then they cut away from it completely, and we don't see any of it. And then the next thing we get is Clegg coming to the laboratory.
Very odd.
And them talking about having seen the act the previous day, which is, very, very strange choice.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I was I was fairly sure that we saw that in the original, and to be honest, it was the only single thing that I'd spotted was missing.
Yeah.
I think this is the thing from the book. I think it must be in the book.
Yeah.
So it only just gets away with it, starting with Clegg being brought in, because the way the Doctor and the Brigadier are reminiscing about the act, it is obvious that we're supposed to have seen what they're talking about. But it does get away with it.
Yes. Yeah, I think so. And I mean, you could say that perhaps they chopped that bit out. Well, I mean, because it was duff, but also because maybe it was inappropriate for a 2:45 kickoff. But then
could be.
But then on the other hand, you then have this issue that Professor Clegg he can do his psychokinesis, but he can't keep it up, and that survived the edit somehow. I thought yes. Did Moffat write this bit? But he was a bit young, probably.
Strange pacing. The Professor Clegg stuff went on a lot longer than I remembered. This is not much. I'm not really covering myself in glory here, because I'm just establishing how little I know about Planet of the Spiders.
Yeah.
I think I'm confusing the fact that he gets killed off relatively early, and with thinking that he's only in it for 5 minutes. But the main reason he's a good character, but I was struck this time. What a good setup it is. The moment when he tries to disguise the fact, when he's telling them I'm sorry, it's all just a show, it's all just a fake.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And the Doctor turns the tables on him. Is a very unexpected twist, a very good twist, not one you get very often. And I personally think you could have got a whole story out of that. I realise I may be slightly biased here because, of course, he talks a bit like Jago. You know, he starts going. he's a much more interesting character, I think, than a lot of the people that we do get after he's killed off
I agree.
all Lupton's boring friends and all the tedious colonists. I realise it would have been a bit, a different story and a bit Holmesy to have had a mildly amusing showman hanging around, and it just wouldn't have fitted in this story. It had to be something completely different. But that's how I feel. Yeah. There is only one type of Doctor Who, and it's the one which has larger-than-life carnies in every episode.
Well, Clegg's death is the finale is the end of episode 1.
Right. Oh, that's odd. Yeah, the Doctor hasn't even got outside the lab yet, has he?
No,
hasn't met Sarah Jane yet.
No, good
Breaks
point.
all the rules.
Does he? I'm just trying to think. No, no, because Sarah's still hanging around at the monastery at that point.
Yeah. Why does Mike call him Sarah rather than the Doctor? I know it doesn't go to the Brigadier, but is that a legacy of Invasion of Dinosaurs? Do they get on? Do they hit it off particularly well, or is it because she's a journalist? Is all this covered and I just wasn't watching?
I think it's the journalist thing.
Yeah.
Because she goes in undercover. That's the thing that she's writing a profile or that she's trying to get some coverage for. Because it's a bit torn for the headlines, I think.
And I wonder also if he's trying to involve UNIT, but he daren't actually speak to the Brigadier after the way in which he disappeared. But
so it's like a soft approach to UNIT. He knows that it'll get back to them.
Yeah.
Well, I found it very striking that Sarah Jane is keeping up her day job in between adventures. This is completely unprecedented for the classic series, isn't it?
True.
It's like every character from the Moffat era.
Yes. Yeah.
And I guess it's a side effect of the fact that she's been introduced at the end of the Pertwee era, which is where the companion tradition, Jo Grant has taken that role of going off into space but then having an Earth life. But Jo Grant worked for UNIT, whereas Sarah Jane has her own job and her own life. So we get this. It's not been decided deliberately. It's just has to be that way. If you've got a character who doesn't work for UNIT and is the companion. But how odd that we got one series of that, and never again until the new era.
The only possible other is Tegan, but I mean she just nips off and fails to be an air stewardess for one story.
Yeah.
So
well, still got no idea why that even happened. So
yeah.
But it's all very the setup. It's quite Quatermassy, isn't it? What with the Doctor suddenly taking an interest in ESP experiments for the purposes of plot. Felt a little bit.
Do we know if they'd set any of this up with the blue crystal in the Green Death, or was it just serendipity?
It's just a thing, isn't it? I mean, the blue crystal. Well, hang on. I mean, he's brought it as a back because he likes the look of it. I think I'm not sure that in the Green Death he knows that it's going to be.
No, I mean I don't mean on screen, but do we know if the right?
It's an interesting question because this is one of the big power. This is one of the thing that struck me as, and we'll get onto the parallels and but the big thing that struck me about this from watching this and then Time of the Doctor was that I was thinking, well, this is the classic series version of Time of the Doctor. Effectively, it is the one. This story is the one thing where it actually culminates and it goes back and picks up all of the, picks up a lot of threads from throughout the last at least 3 years of Pertwee, and because you've also got the the Hermit stuff and the Time Monster, and so on, and so it's kind of the closest parallel that you've got all these things that are that it's kind of been building towards. It's a lot, it's obviously a lot less on the nose than, well, it's just a lot less heavily plotted. Whereas by the time Time of the Doctor was deliberately that entire thing was structured to be that way. The Matt Smith era was structured to work that way roughly. But I think it's the closest parallel. I can't really think of anything else that comes up where it makes quite such a thing of, okay, let's dip back in and take various bits from throughout the last few years and make it a real sort of era finale kind of thing.
Yeah, so going back to the Green Death, I mean, the Doctor does use the blue crystal as a way of breaking hypnotic power, but it feels like it's more a case of, oh, here's a thing that I happened to pick up earlier on my travels, rather than he deliberately picked it up from Metabelis with the thought that I'll be able to use that to break hypnotic power, should I happen to need to do that later on in the story, perhaps.
Regarding what Giles said about missing the scene, you're being funny, but you said we all missed the scene of the flashback to Joe Grant because it's so vivid in the book. But oddly enough, I find her letter, the amount of space and time that's given to recounting her adventures, one of the most vivid glimpses we're ever given of a companion's life post the Doctor. It's quite economically done, but very nicely done. And that's reminiscent of her. The fact that she gets a mention in his last story is similar to the way that Amy gets to pop up in Time of the Doctor, and Clara again for Capaldi's last story, which is now a tradition. And Graham, but not the other fella. Jodie's last story. I've forgotten his name. Who's the one who kept falling off his bike?
Ryan.
Oh, you're
Ryan.
Ryan, yes. Yeah. Just trying to see, because he's been trying to reach Metabelis 3 from Carnival of Monsters onwards.
Yes.
So it's a running gag, as it were.
It is.
At that point. And then he finally gets there.
It's not as nice as he remembers it.
No.
But actually, it's a lot nicer than that later on as well, isn't it? I mean, it's almost entirely a different place from what you see in the Green Death. But then, I guess so is Africa a different place from Britain. So I suppose perhaps he's just landed in a different part of it.
Yes.
Yes, this is very true.
Let's say that. Because this isn't Star Wars where every planet only has one in terrain.
Yeah.
So here's a thought. People always talk about how the Master was supposed to be in this. People all say that, don't they? And this is not true, is it? He was never supposed to be in Planet of the Spiders. They had thought ahead that he would be in Pertwee's last story and had ideas about that, vague, sketchy ideas. But I just remember I used to read in fanzines all the time, people taking that a bit too literally and thinking that John Dirth is playing a character that would have been the Master. That it's just so... It's so obviously not the case, isn't it? It has been specifically written. But do you think... I was wondering as it was going along, for the first 5 minutes I thought this was plausible, because I could imagine, if it wasn't for the fact that Mike could recognise him, I could imagine that when he and Sarah First End meet Lupton, that could be the Master. We could hear the... blue, and it would be the Master in some ludicrous disguise running a meditation group. It's exactly the sort of nonsense he'd get up to.
Yeah.
But after that, no, not at all. His plan, his motivation, his characterization, everything is completely different. So if there's anyone out there who still thinks that, we can put that to bed, can't we, guys?
Maybe it's partly the fact that Lupton is such a well-developed character, and the fact that he seems to be, he's able to match wits with the spider and get the better of his spider at first.
Well, I mean,
which is unusual because you don't expect it to be going that. You don't expect it to go in that direction. I mean, admittedly, it's possibly that may be a bit of War Games style filling to get this up to 6 episodes, so we've got to have a bit more going on. But in the majority of Doctor Who stories of the era, or any era, to be honest, you'd have the spider would leap on his back and take him over, and he'd then be brainwashed for the duration.
Yeah.
Especially since it's the first time you see a spider doing that.
It's just that it wouldn't work with the... I mean, the Master is always making unlikely and ultimately unfortunate bargains with aliens, isn't he? But to have him be under the spell of the spider, as Lupton is from quite early on, would be more... The only time we've ever seen the Master get something that catastrophically wrong is in Survival, where he's fighting to keep the cheetahs out of his head.
He's not under the spell of the spider until... Well, is he? No. Again, I think maybe we're... Because he doesn't...
What I was thinking watching him...
Yeah.
I was watching John Dirth play Lupton. He's got his lovely voice. He's the sort of actor you might cast if you wanted a very grand villain of the old school who's perfectly in charge, which is why he played boss the year before. But he he spends most of the middle part of the story looking very worried and confused. Not really There's no real sense that things are going his way. Once the Doctor blunders in, he has a plan, but it goes awry quite quickly, and then the spiders send him off on the trail of the Doctor. Or, well, not the trail, so the other way around.
Makes you wonder if Barry Letts has introduced this character because he's, as one of those kind of faceless middle managers in the BBC that he's having to battle with somehow.
Well, yeah.
It's quite fun. It's quite fun, the whole aspect that it's a sort of Reggie Perrin gone wrong.
Yeah.
Kind of, the whole...
It's wonderfully mundane, isn't it?
Yes,
His motivation.
I mean, they're all a bit, they're all a bit tragic, the whole lot of them.
Could be Robert
bunch
Sloman.
of middle-aged men, old Nimrod there. And,
Could be Robert Sloman, you're right.
What was Robert Sloman's background? Was he sort of... I just get I've got the strangest feeling that perhaps he came from some sort of real world... Whereas Barry Letts had always been in showbiz, hasn't he?
Show business, that's right.
Whereas, yeah. Anyway. But I mean, he spends most of the rest of the story looking rather on the back foot, Lupton, in my opinion, and only once or twice gets his mojo back. But he spends a lot of time pleading. Also, he disappears the story quite a long time towards the end and is replaced by his 4 boring mates.
Yes, that's
which
true,
is
because they're often
quite one of the weaker parts, because we miss him, but also we think, will you 4 clear off? Not terrible. There's a point where even the edit, I thought I was very impressed with the edit. It kept the pace up very nicely, and it seems to slow down quite a lot towards the end, and I couldn't work out. There's an extended bit where the Doctor's in with Campo. Is it Tommy?
Yeah.
Is outside defending them from the 4 boring 40-year-old men. And it goes on forever, and it just feels like it's clear it hasn't been cut down with the same amount of vigour as the rest of the story.
But then that is one of the very, very odd cuts in the full version, because they basically I didn't get to the bottom of I was obviously reading with the production subtitles on, and I didn't quite get to the bottom of why they got themselves into this pickle, but they had severe underruns and so on. I think certainly episodes 4 and 5 both put in stuff from the next episode into. I think it's an issue with 4 that they had to put in stuff from 5, so that they're 5 running short. So the end of 5 and the start of 6 are different cuts of the same thing. So basically, it's all the stuff with Tommy outside of the room, and I think the cliffhanger is Tommy getting zapped with. Yeah. I think the cliffhanger ended up with Tommy being zapped by the baddies, and then in episode 6, it goes from like the scene before that, and then you have 2 or 3 more scenes before you cut back to the Tommy getting zapped by the baddies bit, and it picking up from there.
It stuck out with me like a sore thumb, and it's rather unfortunate that that's exactly the sort of thing you could have cleared up in a compilation edit. It wouldn't have been an issue anymore. And they appear to have failed to take advantage of that. The other, what makes it particularly odd, it sort of highlights a different, separate problem, nitpicking again, but it's at that point of the story that it becomes obvious that the fact that the spider's electrocution powers are very ill-defined becomes impossible to ignore. Sometimes it's treated as though a single shot is going to be... Well, no, we know from early on that a single shot isn't fatal.
Yeah.
Because people get up 5 minutes later, they're fine. But at this... Tommy's standing there taking blast after blast of this thing and show no ill effects, and you're thinking there's going to be a plot point there, but there isn't. Then Mike jumps in front and takes 1 shot, and everyone acts as if he's dead. And he's done something heroic by saving Tommy, who's already had 1,000 of them bounce off him. Campo gets hit by 1 and actually dies. The whole thing gets very confusing, and I have nothing more to say about that than that it shouldn't be. On the other hand, spiders that can shoot electricity and teleport are exactly the sort of thing that Doctor Who was made for. Where else would you see that? Apart from a fever dream.
Did you get the the scene where Lupton turns the tables on the spider in the cut down?
Yes.
Right. Okay. Because the thing is, there's all the stuff with her on his back before then. Although she disappears, but it's sort of a I felt like it's presented as a partnership, and he's sort of she's guiding him, but he's and then there's that bit where she says, "Oh yeah, so you've got ideas of your own, have you?" And then he turns the tables on her. From that point onwards, and it's only really when they get to Metabolus, and there's spiders in numbers, that they really get the better of him, I think.
I think what I was trying to say then, maybe not so much in the writing of Lupton's plot as in the playing. John Dirth doesn't look like he's in control, which really makes it clear that this makes it feel much less like this could have been a story he could have given to the Master.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think I'm fairly happy that it wasn't supposed to be. So it's a complete waste of time talking about it.
Well, it's interesting.
But it is I did have one thing to say about that, and that's that when they make clear that the similar motivation between Lupton's ambitions and the spider he's serving, who wants to overthrow the Queen, that's nice.
Yeah,
it's nice to have a faction among the spiders.
Yes, definitely.
It's quite an ambitious thing to do, considering they all look. I mean, all Doctor Who monsters look identical to each other, but it is a nice twist that's why they're using each other.
People have complained in the past that Choji and Campo are a bit offensive in terms of the acting and the portrayal as Tibetan monks. However, they're both Time Lords, and since, so far as we know, in 1974, all Time Lords are white men from the planet Rada, they are, in fact, what they appear to be, which is white men cosplaying as Tibetan monks. So, I mean, yes, they are offensive in their portrayal of Tibetan monks, but they are. You're watching people actually being offensive rather than, if you see what I mean, in the fiction as well as in the reality.
Well, there you go. You seem to be getting drifting the same realms that Russell was using to explain the Toymaker's motivation. I made him do lots of incredibly offensive European accents that we would never have got away with otherwise, to show that he's a racist. Because we know he's a racist because he wore a Chinese coat once.
Right.
I'm not going to go into that any more deeply.
No.
I thought that was a bit silly.
Yeah.
But very funny to watch.
When did this all come up? I'm just trying to think. Okay, late 50s. I'm just wondering whether there's any case to be made for the idea that he was inspired by Lobsang Rampa at all. He was the famous plumber from Lhasa.
Oh yeah.
You ever heard of this case?
Don't know. No.
He wrote a book that sold 500,000 copies. Tuesday Lobsang Rampa claimed to have grown up in a Tibetan monastery, encountering yetis, yogic flying, and other Buddhist mysteries. Wrote a book called The Third Eye, and then turned out to be a plumber from Devon.
There's so much that's about it. It reminds me of that magician who pretended to be Chinese, who Li Sen Chang is possibly based upon. Or possibly should have been based upon.
Rampa nevertheless I'm reading from an article in The Guardian. Rampa nevertheless garnered a global following. His 20 books range from an interstellar travel memoir entitled My Visit to Venus to Living with the Lama, transmitted to him telepathically by his cat, Mrs. Fifi Grey Whiskers.
There's a lot of it about in the 70s, wasn't there?
Yes, yeah.
It's a shame it's coming back in fashion now among the conspiracy theorists. Still, what goes around?
But I mean, part of it's obviously that there were genuine Tibetan refugees, effectively coming to the West after China.
Yes.
In the aftermath of through the 50s and 60s, and obviously Barry himself was a Buddhist of some description, wasn't he? He was a follower of Yes.
Yeah. So I wasted the 45 minutes that I gained by watching the cut down version by then going on to watch the making of on the DVD.
Excellent. I meant to get around to that but didn't. Yeah.
Barry Letts was talking about that on the making of documentary, and I guess you got the impression that of him talking in later life that he looked back with a little embarrassment in terms of quite how fervently enthusiastic he'd been in his 50s, was it, when he wrote this? 40s or 50s, perhaps I think he was still a Buddhist adherent, but maybe not quite as. And he did say that he knew nothing about Tibetan Buddhism. His interest was Zen Buddhism, so he may have got some of the details wrong. He thought perhaps in the storytelling.
You see, if this was a Mac Hulk rewriting, who'd sort of take. I just don't know enough about Sloman to but it's almost like you'd think it's the you've got the. Yeah, you'd almost think there's a little bit of a battle between Barry Letts going, Buddhism, let's have lots of Buddhism, and then a somewhat more jaded or cynical writer saying, yes, but let's make them all frustrated all the people at the retreat are frustrated middle managers and tiny petty men, and you'd think you might do something like that, but.
But there is perhaps a throwback there to the demons, isn't there? Because in the demons you've got all the little people in the village, haven't you?
Yes, yeah, that's very true.
So that may well be a Robert Sloman or a Barry Letts thing for that matter.
Yeah.
It's interesting seeing Robert Sloman writing Sarah Jane because mostly, I mean, like 99% of the time she was in character, but there were a couple of lines when she starts speaking groovy 70s speak, more like the sort of stuff that Sloman gives to Joe Grant and a lot of his other young people. But you have to really tune in to hear it. I think it's because Liz Sladen's such a good actress, she covers it up.
Yeah. There was one decent story in the making of, which was that Richard Franklin was saying that he was essentially written out of the series because he had commitments in Yorkshire and he couldn't make it down to London all that often. Actually, as it turns out, the unit was written out by Philip Hinchcliffe not much longer after this anyway. So, I think the end result of all of this is that Franklin gets 3 interesting stories for his last 3, and decent parts in all of them.
Yep.
Whereas John Levine, by contrast, is very much a bit part player.
Yep. And yeah, absolutely. If I were him, I was thinking about that. I would definitely have traded possibly appearing in the background. Getting more of his usual shtick in Robot and Zygons at the most for what he did get. But and Benton's not in this, and the Brigadier's only in 2 episodes. No, is Benton in it?
Very briefly.
Oh, so he is in the first
2 episodes
just
and
the
at the
first
very
episode.
end. But no,
Yeah. So anyway, So
but it's not like unit don't get called in.
They must have really appreciated him as a character, and it's quite a vote of confidence in him as an actor as well to give him this. So interesting that they don't give Unit more to do. I suppose they didn't think it was going to be their swan song, did they? And I did also wonder. Did they go on and record Robot very soon after this?
Apparently simultaneously.
Right.
There's or at least there's a bit of an overlap anyway.
I mean, it's a silly little thing, but they've made reference to Dr. Sullivan, who then turns up in the next story. I'm sure I've seen people suggest it was just a coincidence, or not a coincidence, but not a plan, not a deliberate reference to a character they knew was going to appear. I mean, they even if they hadn't recorded them simultaneously, Dix must have been writing Robot and would have known where it was going. So anyway, I guess the point is they didn't think Unit was going out, and even if it was, there was going to be one more big Unit bash coming.
Yes.
So.
Indeed.
Yes, because it's the kind of scenario in which you'd expect Unit to turn up at the monastery.
Yes, with some bazookas.
Again, that's the sort of
Sharp of the 8 legs there. 5 rounds around. Doesn't work.
Yes.
Why did I just do a John Pertwee voice for my Brigadier impression? I
don't know.
I'm recovering from a cold, everybody. It's happening to my brain.
Just in terms of the writing craft, I was going to like the way it's put together. And again, I'm not sure what made it to the cut. There's a couple of nice little touches, like in episode 4, I think it is, where they tell the story of the crash and how the spiders came to be, kind of thing, through interweaving 2 separate people narrating the. We get
that did make the cut.
The 2 separate info dumps of it,
yes.
To which helps to break that up and make it. You get a lot. It covers a lot of ground in a short space of time without having to sort of fall back on
Relatively
one.
sophisticated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, yes, it's the on-screen flashbacks in episode 5, which is again, that's somewhat unusual for Doctor Who's. It's not something that usually enters into Doctor Who's grammar in general, is it?
Every time something odd like that happened, I kept thinking, I wonder if this is an art, part of the cut down version, and it never was. It was just.
It's not for the Daleks in colour either. We haven't discussed that one, have we?
Yeah. We did talk about, when I spoke to Ben about his editing job on the Daleks in colour, and we remembered that it was, it was something that had actually happened in the Daleks itself, in that Susan remembers Ian telling her to get back to the quite quickly.
And you all quite confidently said it was the only time they'd ever in a flashback in Classic Who. Is that where you were going with that?
No, well, Ben also mentioned some in Unearthly Child, but yes, you're right. We'd ignored these ones in Planet of the Spiders. So yes, it just goes to show.
I was astonished when it happened.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
I can't be alone in being slightly disheartened when we get to the planet of the shouting colonists, can I? You have to have a heart of stone not to think, oh my God, here we go again. Why can they never... suddenly we get a group of people who make Lupton's 4 boring friends seem well-defined. Why can they not write these people with any sense of commitment or sense of reality? And why do the actors drop into... It's odd. I mean, normally they go into mock classical mode when they're playing people from another civilization in togas. But here, they've all got Mummerset accents, and yet still somehow they seem to simultaneously be ooh-ah, but also speaking in some sort of strangely heightened faux classical language. It's a really bad combination.
Yeah. But aside from the women, and then Jenny Laird just sort of comes on and declaims.
Yeah, I feel like her role is minimised in the cut-down version, but maybe I'm remembering more in the original version just because it was so awful.
There's not that much.
I came away with the impression that they cut more early on in the story and started letting, and the edit got a bit flabbier later on. But maybe they didn't, and I just felt. I wish they'd cut more later on. It's just very difficult to tell without a complete set of notes. Perhaps there is one. Perhaps there will be on the Blu-ray, a PDF of all the editing notes. By the way, technical question. Do we know if this is a genuine original edit from the BBC archives, or was it one of the ones they remade because they had the notes of the cuts that were made?
No, I believe it's the original because it says unrestored on the DVDs.
Okay.
So it's not chopped out of the one that they've
It didn't
restored
look
anyway.
too bad. When I accidentally got close to TV to for some reason. It looked a bit grainy, but by and large, it was...
it was a lot better than anything that you'd see at the Riverside, one of those DWAS events. Yeah, I thought it was perfectly watchable on my telly.
Where do they source their viewing prints from? Australian Affairs?
Yes, something like that.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
But I mean, there is something about seeing terrible quality Doctor Who on a big screen that it's hard to beat.
Yeah.
So there's an allegation. I mean, it made it as far as the production notes that RADA until 1965 awarded Jenny Laird Prize for acting achievement in a thankless role, for which the recipient got a $5, which suggests that Jenny Laird at some point in her younger days had knocked it out of the park acting in a thankless role. Well, she's in Black Narcissus and things like that. And yet she's become this byword for,
Well, everyone has a bad week, I suppose.
Yeah.
And I guess it's unfortunate for her that her bad week's one that's been seen by tens of thousands of people because it's survived in the archive.
Yes.
I guess you've got the climax, and I guess what the Doctor says is that he's become greedy for knowledge, and it's part of this Buddhist allegory.
Yes.
On the making of documentary, Terence said he doesn't really get by this. He doesn't see that as being in the Third Doctor's character particularly. He said John maybe, but the Third Doctor no. And it does seem a bit of a I mean, it works well in the story itself, but it does seem slightly unusual for the Third Doctor to suddenly become self-critical at this point.
Yeah, or rather, it's something he tends to do once per series when Barry lets him writing it. I mean, it is astonishing
true.
across that era how many different Third Doctors there are. Well, there's not that many. There's 2 or 3, depending on which way you look at it. But he is distinctly different, isn't he? When he's getting philosophical, from the gung ho, the Bob Holmes version where he's being very clubbable and sarcastic, and then he's met the mellow Let Sloman version.
Yeah, it's interesting this whole Buddhist parable thing. That I wonder whether that was Barry, like post facto. But I'm not sure. I mean, I think there was something to... Because the whole thing with the Lost Delgado finale was going to be that there was going to be that the Master was going to turn out to be some reflection of the Doctor's id or something, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Supposedly.
If not literally his brother, then...
So he'd have been the Valeyard before his time. It was sort of the implication, in which case, God knows what that would have done to us with regeneration and so on. And I think, maybe because they didn't go down that route, then they went down another route of but doing something similarly self-exploratory kind of thing. But the thing that struck me watching it was, I was just thinking, hang on, Lord of the Rings.
All right.
Yeah, because I thought, well, hang on. So the Doctor goes on a random adventure and picks up this crystal that ends up being the one crystal that is, and then has to go on something of an epic quest to Mount Doom, where you've got giant spiders. Okay. And the Doctor has to go to, ends up having to take it to, go into Mordor, and he actually takes it to, what's his name? Sauron. But, But I kind of thought, that's definitely...
If the Master had been there, he could have been the Gollum character and been fighting with him over it on the precipice.
Yeah. Why didn't they keep Lupton around for that? That could have been good.
Well, exactly.
That could have been good too. Then it would have really been,
Are this just a sign of how, unfortunately, ultimately, as interesting as he may be, he's not a big enough character to stick around for the heft of the story that we're turn out to be telling. So there is a slight mismatch there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, going with your Lord of the Rings analogy, it does feel to me that what we end up with in this is quite a literary story, which is hard to realise on screen, and probably, quite a lot of the things that we're been complaining about is just because, for a 1970s studio-bound story, it was... It was, I mean, they've given it a very good go, I suppose you'd say.
Maybe that's why I like the book so much.
I think it's the sets, once we get to Metebelis, that let it down.
Yeah.
And it's only the sets, really. The models are great. The landscape shots are very good. And the spiders look great. They look more than good enough to... Visuals on Doctor Who only ever have to be good enough to convince and or scare children. That's what they're there for. They don't have to stand up for adults. And we adults have no business being pissy about the look of Doctor Who. But the sets are terrible. I mean, it's Doctor Who in a nutshell. The Earth stuff looks terrific because it's just a house, and the BBC can do that. Any BBC designer can make that look great. But this person is clearly, I don't know who did the sets, but they're clearly terrified by the idea of being asked to create the spider's throne room. It's just, that's the nadir, really. It's just a table, a curved table.
Yes, yeah.
I was trying to work out ways you could improve it with new special effects, new backgrounds, but you can't really. You need too much rotoscoping. So we get there eventually with the Great One's cave, but if only the
that's very well done.
The initial room could have been some sort of scaled down version of that.
Yeah,
It just looks so pitifully prosaic. Yes, you're saying.
I was going to say, I remember that at some point in the mid-70s on Blue Peter, some teenage, well, at least he seemed a bit older than me anyway, appeared in the Blue Peter studio with a model that he'd made of the spiders in the spider throne room. So obviously it had made an impression on some fan or other.
Yeah.
Whether that appears on the DVD as well, I don't know. I didn't look that hard.
If it didn't, it'll be on the Blu-ray. They're not going to miss anything this time round. It's the last chance to stuff it with every bit of crap.
Yeah. Last thoughts, and then we wrap up.
Two things that I don't think we've touched on, particularly Tommy. What do we make of him? And he's a bit, supposedly Sloman expressed doubts subsequently, felt that he wouldn't have done that these days, or in the 90s, or whenever he was being interviewed.
Yeah, I mean, take a step back. Ultimately, what is the point of him in the story? Is it just a bit of colour? Or is he supposed to represent any of the themes?
Well, it feels like he is, because he gets enlightened. He becomes the enlightened. Yeah. It feels like, although it's not spelt out, it feels like he gets enlightened by the crystal in some. He achieves enlightenment or whatever, and becomes.
Yeah. Yes, which is tricky, isn't it? Because that's obviously not. If a villain had achieved enlightenment, that would have been more. I mean, obviously, we would prefer Sarah Jane not to shout at him, "You're normal." What? or for Campo to say he's been cured, or this is what cured him. But what you can't really. This is hardly surprising for the time. Weighing it up, he's not quite sympathetically written and acted, even if it's fundamentally misconceived.
Yeah.
So, isn't he the bloke who wrote Terry and June, by the way?
Well, yes. So, he's a very good actor, and he subsequently went on and wrote. Well, I think he's a very good actor, and he subsequently wrote The Feathered Serpents.
Oh yeah.
70s ITV, was it ITV? Well, anyway,
it's about the Aztec
drama.
Yeah,
staple of that was very well received, and yes, Terry and June.
Well, nobody's perfect.
Frankly, yeah.
I mean, I guess he's being portrayed as sort of fairly pure-hearted, and I mean, maybe that's also a bit. Yeah, it's perhaps talking down to someone to say that he could only be pure-hearted.
It's tricky.
I don't know.
It's tricky. It's
yes.
It's a bit of a cliche, but and a bit patronising. But what's the opposite? You have representation. You have somebody with the same condition Tommy has, who's a complete bastard.
Yes.
That nobody's going to be very happy about.
Yes, RTD wouldn't go with that, would he?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
No.
Well, I mean, look, it's part of the story, so.
Like with a lot of things that we come across in 60s and 70s Doctor Who, it could have been worse.
Oh, I think it's hard to...
And they meant well.
It's
Those
hard
two
to
phrases have been inscribed on the programme's tombstone.
Talking of it could have been worse and they meant well. The other thing we haven't actually... We've managed to completely skirt around the elephant in the room that is the chase.
Right. Yes.
I'm not watching that again. I don't care what you compare it with.
Well, presumably you saw a cut-down version of it, I guess.
Well, you'd think that, wouldn't you? I was going to mention that.
Or did they keep that in?
I think it was virtually intact.
Yeah.
Except
the tramp's not in it, is he?
Except the tramp, the comedy tramp. So all the serious parts of the chase are there.
Okay.
They've tightened it up by removing the comedy tramp.
Do they have the comedy policeman?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes, it does.
Because I hadn't realised until it was pointed out on the production notes quite what a rip-off of Live and Let Die the whole thing is.
Right.
It's a sort of shot for shot low budget remake of the
the pigeon that does a double take.
Well, that's true.
They couldn't afford that.
The comedy policeman is J.W. Pepper. Yeah,
I really enjoyed it this time.
Fair enough.
Yeah. I mean, I would say overall, I found the cut down version much more acceptable on the basis that it was quite a lot shorter. And having remembered it being tedious to watch, it was actually
Indeed.
zipped by a decent pace.
It's kind of. I was delighted by it, and it's also ruined the story for me now because I don't think I'd ever go back to the long version.
You see, now
I want more of these.
Okay.
I want to know, but I'm not enough to research it myself. Whether they cut whole scenes to speed it up, or just cut scenes down. I mean,
they definitely
didn't...
cut parts out of one of the scenes, because when I looked at the transcript of a scene, it was quite a lot longer than the bit that was on the compilation.
Because the more cuts you make, the harder work it is. But
yes,
but I believe they were all planned very thoroughly on paper beforehand. So have we done Genesis of the Daleks yet? Because of course there are two cut downs of that, two competing ones.
Yeah.
One of which I gather has a much better reputation than the other. But,
no, we haven't.
And also, again, based on nothing but my own feeling, it didn't feel like they'd edited it in the way that a lot of modern action films were edited, where they'd cut all the character stuff first and just left the plot. I never got that feeling. There was plenty of whimsy and character, and it just seemed very nicely balanced. So I don't know what they cut. Write in and tell me.
Did Barry Letts do the cut himself? Do we know?
I believe so, but I can't tell you for certain that he did.
Okay.
Well, he'd obviously have had skin in the game on both sides of things, I guess. Like he'd have.
So the other thing you were going to mention, presumably, was Nick Courtney's hair.
No, I think they're okay.
No,
Yes.
I mean, goodness me, he's not looked very military for a while now. But there are limits.
Frankly,
He looks like it's a Bob from Whatever Happened to the Likely Lads.
Oh,
well.
Yeah, standards are slipping in unit.
Yeah, he's a young and thrusting chap about town. I don't know. Certainly, the pictures of Nick Courtney from that era shown to be anything but military in nature.
With his cravat and his...
he looks very actorly.
Yes.
If there is a type.
And Doris, of course, gets her first look in, doesn't she?
Although I was going to ask you, that's in the...
Oh yes, that was chopped, wasn't it? Yes.
We
We don't get Doris.
Oh, you don't
They
get
had
Doris
no
in the
idea
cut.
back then how
Okay.
important that mention would
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, that's true.
be. That's the mother of Kate Stewart.
Yeah.
Everyone's favourite regenerating unit boss.
Oh, is she actually? Is she
What?
actually Kate's mother canonically?
I've no idea. How would I know?
I don't know.
I wasn't there.
Okay, fair enough. No, I mean, I always had the.
Or is she the daughter of the first Mrs. Stewart?
Well, you see, that was my suspicion.
I'm sure it's been covered. And of course, Kate's had for all us downtime fans, Kate's had an interesting journey herself. I'd love to fit a story in that Kate's wilderness years to see how she got from a hippie on a boat to this power-dressed
Scientific advisor.
Yeah. Well done,
there we
Planet
go.
Spiders. It's always rated very lowly in my memory, to the extent that I never watch it. And now I won't watch it anymore, but I will think of it fondly.
I don't know how to watch this cut down version I've heard so much about.
Well, I'd give yourself a few weeks. I'm not sure it's that much better than the one that you
you'll
watched,
probably,
but it is.
I mean, you might find all sorts of faults with it. You might think they cut that. This is so ham-fisted. So who knows?
Yeah.
I was blissfully ignorant of what was missing, and I like that.
Yeah. Well, if I leave it a few weeks, then I'll be blissfully ignorant again, I'm sure.
Yeah. So, do you want a brief interlude before we go into the other one?
I wouldn't mind quickly brewing up another cup of tea, but yeah.
Righto.
Second half will be shorter, won't it? Always is.